Making the playoff in 2024 for Oregon, going to be easier than 2025.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We'll talk about this year versus next year. How good can Jeffrey Bassa be? Really? Could he be better than Noah Sewell? That's an interesting question we'll talk about. And the Generation O uniforms are coming today. I have some thoughts on the matter. But in 2024, Oregon is a playoff contender. They're a big playoff favorite, as I talked about earlier this week. And I got a question from one of you that made me think about what Oregon's playoff chances are as you look ahead to 2025. Now, the quarterback position, I feel incredibly good about what Oregon brings to the table because you'll have Dante Moore. You'll have a competition he'll have to go through. He's not going to, I don't think, just be given the job. He's going to have to win the job. But who is going to be his quarterback coach? Who's going to be his offensive coordinator? And will it be Will Stein? Because if Oregon goes all out this year and has that all-in mentality with guys coming back and who they've brought in the transfer portal and the coaching staff continuity, is Will Stein going to be a head coaching candidate? I think he is going to be a head coach one day. He has that sort of trajectory to be a Power 4 coordinator at his age is not something you see a lot. It happens, and I think there is certainly a youth movement in the coaching ranks in college football across the country. The job he'd be immediately tied to, in my mind, is Louisville. That's where he's a graduate of. That job is not coming open. He would not leave Oregon to be an offensive coordinator at Louisville. But if you got a premier group of 5 job that opened, for instance, would he take that opportunity? I mean, Marcus Arroyo did. Now, I think Will Stein is much better than Marcus Arroyo, but Arroyo got the chance to go coach down at UNLV, and Andy Avalos got the chance to go coach at Boise State, and Joe Moorhead got the chance to go coach at Akron. So there's a track record here. You have success at Oregon, you're going to lose coordinators. Kenny Dillingham's down at Arizona State. And so I think that paints a picture pretty easily that it might very well be a lot easier to make the playoff this year than next year. There are other areas of the roster I'll touch on about, how much better Oregon is likely to be this year than next season because of players that they will lose. But you can't overlook the coaching continuity aspect of it. It's not a common thing in today's college football world. I think I've heard Josh Pate mention this before. Something like a third of all college football coaches have changed jobs in the offseason. One out of 3? It's amazing after the year Oregon had a season ago that they did keep all of the coaches that they were looking for. And, Carlos Loughlin went elsewhere. Rashad Samples comes in from Arizona State. That's looking like a really, really good hire, and we'll see how it plays out this year. But I have high hopes for him. I don't even know if he's going to be around for a long time. Kenny Dillingham has said, yeah, that's a guy who could run a program one day, maybe even right now. So Stein, I think, has head coaching aspirations. Samples, I think, certainly could. I don't know that Junior Adams does. I don't think Tosh Lupoy does. Chris Hampton absolutely could. But if Stein goes elsewhere, yeah, Dan Lanning has made 2 outstanding hires at offensive coordinator in his time with the Ducks. Dillingham, Stein, and you have to make another one. I'd expect it. I would think it would be a good one. You'd never go 100% with coordinator hires when you have a high turnover rate. You just don't. The greatest coach in the history of this sport, Nick Saban, has made coordinator hires that you look back and go, yeah, that wasn't any good. Yeah, that didn't work out. Yeah, that's not. I'm not saying I think the next offensive coordinator hire, which I certainly think would come from elsewhere rather than being an in-house promotion. I do not. That was a question that came in from Andrew. I think it's definitely an outside hire sort of role, and I'm okay with that, even if it's somebody whose stock would be rising and is kind of a 2-year rental or a 3-year rental. And there's no guarantee Stein leaves after the season. I just suspect that Oregon's profile is going to be tremendously high. And, I don't think coaches or schools rather would look at Will Stein and say, I don't know. I mean, he's worked with a couple of transfer quarterbacks, and they're the most experienced quarterbacks in the history of the game. I don't know if that's the guy. I'm not going to factor that into the calculation at all. I see how somebody could, which is why I brought it up. But if Oregon's offense, is among the best in the Big Ten, and they play for the Big Ten championship, and let's just say they lose, they go to the playoff, they win a game or two, yeah, your coordinator's got a good chance of getting poached. I don't think Tosh Lupoy would. I think Chris Hampton would. I think Tosh Lupoy is kind of hitching his wagon to Dan Lanning. That's the vibe and sense that I get on that side of the ball. But I think that looming reality that Stein and Hampton, between those two, one of them's gone after this year. I would be surprised if they're both back again for 2025. And sometimes when you lose an assistant coach like that, the guy you hire isn't always the right replacement. It just doesn't always work out that way. Heck, when you first get somewhere, Auburn, for example, Hugh Freeze got down there and let go of his offensive coordinator after one season. Well, he brought that guy in, thought it was the right move, might have looked good on paper, didn't work out on the field. So the Stein component, I think, definitely adds a level of urgency to Oregon making the playoff this year. It's not that they can't next year. You don't know who's going to return. Guys like Evan Stewart or Josh Connerly are NFL prospects, but are they going to be fully ready? We don't really know. That might depend on how they play in this particular season. But you also don't know which coaches are going to depart. There's going to be some turnover. There's going to be some element of turnover. And I have a hard time thinking that Oregon, okay, not a hard time. Right now, if I had to guess, I'd say next year's team will not go into 25 with as much hype as this year's team. You got a very senior-laden roster. You got a bunch of key returners who are going to be out of eligibility. Guys like Jordan Birch and Jeff Bassa, we'll talk about later, and Tiefer, and you want to have Muhammad. And you can replace those guys with transfer portal pieces. And Oregon's got recruiting classes stacked up. I think all the stars align for Oregon to make a run at a national championship this year. Next season might be more like, let's get in the playoffs, see if you can make a run, but might not be a national championship team. Depends on how the offseason goes. But you can't overstate the importance of having coaching staff continuity and keeping guys on staff that are really, really integral to what you're doing and why you're being successful. I mean, you look at what Nick Aliotti meant, for instance. Once he retired, Oregon's defensive staff eventually led to Mark Helfrich's firing because their defense was atrocious. If Aliotti stays, things might have been different. And I don't know that, Dan Lanning doesn't have another great offensive coordinator in mind, but you don't know who that is. You don't know who that is. And you have a good idea of who the quarterback will be. He'll have weapons. Offensive line could be a question. You lose a couple of key players. There is depth at certain positions, I think more so than others. But when I look at this 2024 team, right now I'd say the outlook of their chance to win a national championship is a lot stronger in 2024 than it is in 2025. That's before the offseason has happened. But I think Chris Hampton's really good. I think Will Stein is really good. And I think a lot of players who definitely can't be on the team next year are also quite good. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. Speaking of one of those guys that is not going to be on the team next year, Jeffrey Bassa. I got an interesting question about Jeffrey Bassa. He is maybe the most important player on Oregon's defense this year, and we'll talk about why coming up next. That's, of course, after we talk about Game Time, which is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, and those are both good things. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, their lowest price guarantee. Game Time just takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc., whatever you're looking for, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account Redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Another guarantee, I always need a second segment sip. Let's get into it here. This question came in from Zaheem. Mailbag is always open. YouTube comments, X. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext. Mailbag Q. Do you think Jeff Bassa can be better than Noah Sewell this upcoming season? So, Noah Sewell's a player that in retrospect, I don't think Oregon fans quite remember how good he was. In that weird COVID year in 2020, he was quite literally the best player on Oregon's defense. It felt like he was making every single tackle. When Noah Sewell had what was viewed as a down year, at least in the interactions that I had with Oregon fans and kind of the discussion around him, he still made second team all Pac-12. Jeff Bassa just had his best season, and Noah Sewell had, I think, one or two first team selections. Jeff Bassa just had his best season as a college football player, by far, not even close. Second team all Pac-12. So I think these guys coming out of high school had very different profiles. And I think Jeffrey Bassa is so important to what Oregon is going to try to accomplish on defense this year for three reasons, actually. Number one, he's going to have the headset on his helmet, in his helmet. So he's going to relay the defensive play calls and, hear from Tosh Lupo and Dan Lanning, everybody, and get everything situated, right? Quarterback of the defense. That's the first reason. Second reason, the linebacker depth is not insanely good. I don't think it's a glaring issue because you have Devin Jackson as a number 3, and he might have the highest ceiling of any of these guys playing linebacker. But it's not as if I feel like Oregon goes 5 deep at that position. Connor Soley came in from Arizona State where he was, mostly a special teams guy, and last year he was mostly a special teams guy. I don't have high hopes or expectations for him. Maybe he surprises me, but I don't think he's going to be a major player in that linebacker room. I think Devin Jackson as a number 3 is really good. I think the number 2 backup linebacker spot next to Jackson is pretty up in the air. You could see a guy like Jerry Mixon or maybe a true freshman slides into the mix. I don't know. I don't know. But last year, Oregon, we don't really know what's happening with Bryce Betcher. Because if he gets drafted in the upcoming Major League Baseball draft, I don't think it's happened yet. But if he goes that route, then he might not be back to play football. Like that's still, last I'd heard anyway, is not something that has been decided. So those reasons, along with the playmaking that Jeffrey Bassa is capable of, and Oregon's defense last year, I wouldn't say had a bunch of disruptive guys outside of the defensive front. I think Jordan Birch, I think Brandon Dorlus, and, Mateo and Tatum Tuioti, those guys were disruptive and playmakers. I think they kind of lacked playmakers outside the line of scrimmage. And right now, I think Jabbar Muhammad's your best second or third level playmaker. Your second one might be Jeffrey Bassa. I'm just thinking off the top of my head as I've gone down this little mini rabbit hole here. And yeah, that's probably your second most impactful playmaker. And when he had success last year, Oregon had success. One of Jeffrey Bassa's best games of his career, he had 2 interceptions against Utah. That was a 35-6 victory. Not a coincidence that he was playing well. So I think he does a lot for Oregon's defense. He can blitz, he can cover, he can tackle in space, and I think career-wise, he's had a really, really old school trajectory. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He played as a true freshman. He was mostly at the safety spot. They kind of moved him down to linebacker. He was back and forth. He was recruited as a safety. Then he moves to linebacker in his sophomore year in the 22 season, Lanning's first, and he struggles. He was not big enough. But he stays around, doesn't hit the portal, hits the weight room, shows up way bigger, and has an all-conference season, and he decides to stay for a 4th year. So Noah Sewell was, I want to confirm this real quick, he was taken by the Bears in the number 148 pick in the draft. What is that? What is that round-wise? What are the 32 NFL teams? I just wanted to Round 5. Okay. Noah Sewell was a 5th round draft pick. I saw an account, I don't know if it was a big one, talking about under the radar NFL draft prospects, and Jeff Bassa was one of them. And, it was just one of those things flying around, summer content, whatever. It wasn't a huge deal. I did think about that, though, because Oregon's going to have several players drafted. Again, Jordan Birch will get drafted, and, Derek Harmon probably gets drafted. Caldwell, maybe, I think, possibly. Jabbar Muhammad definitely gets drafted. But where does Jeffrey Bassa go? Because that's a guy who 2 years ago had just about 0 NFL prospects. He doesn't have 0 NFL prospects now. And I think that Sewell was a little bit more of a downhill guy, whereas Bassa is a little bit more athletic, being a former safety, and ranges sideline to sideline. If he pops this year in the Big Ten, that I think is an opportunity for him to up his draft stock and get taken earlier than Sewell. But can he end up being better than Noah Sewell? I don't know that he can. Speaking of the Big Ten and Noah Sewell, remember back to a key 4th and 2 stop in that game in which the run hole was plugged by, drumroll please, Noah Sewell. And I think Sewell had a fantastic career. Wasn't as strong in coverage. Pro Football Focus thought he was a little bit better than, fans or people like me might have thought over the course of that year. But I think that Bassa's got a higher potential ceiling, because if he's able to play as he did a year ago, but amplify what makes him a good player and become a great player, yeah, I think he could end up being a better overall linebacker and a better overall NFL prospect. And I think where that comes down is in coverage. I don't think he could ever be better than Noah Sewell blitzing and stopping the run, but I think he could still be a more rangy player, and I think he could be better in individual coverage situations because of the safety background that he had. But I've always been a Noah Sewell fan. I think he's really good, and I think Bassa is a really he's been just a fun player to watch. Like, he's been there with Oregon all 4 years. There's no COVID redshirt. Like, everything about him is so traditional, standard, upright, awesome guy. I remember at the Pac-12 championship game, he came to the podium, and I mean, that was not a fun time to be there. And he had such a cool head about it. Like, I could tell. I asked him a couple questions about, what Washington was running, the blitzes not getting home and everything. And he answered them in a way that was, number one, accurate and honest. And number two, that just gave off the impression that he embraces the leadership role. That's how it came off to me. And when, I see mic'd up moments, or I just look at the way the guys play on the field, Bassa feels like that sort of guy, that he's not just in a position where he has to be a leader. I think he wants to be the leader. I think he wants to be the guy who's got the headset in his helmet so that he can talk to the coaches and get everybody organized. He wants to be the guy who will go out there, face the media, and answer tough questions when, he doesn't have the day and the defense didn't have the day that they were hoping for in the biggest game of the year. Like, that's how he seemed to me, and I think he's very genuine in that. So I expect him to have a monstrous season, and I think he and Justin Jacobs are a superb linebacker tandem. I think they are really capable. I think Jacobs, too, could really have a breakout year. I mean, we really didn't get to see him the last season because he was injured until the Washington State game. That's when he first played, and he was making an impact. He was making an impact, and I like what he brings to the table. So give me those two guys fully healthy, and I think Oregon's linebackers as good as any tandem as you can find in the Big Ten if they're both able to stay on the field. Love that question. And to just, put a clear answer out there, I think he can be better than Noah Sewell. I don't think he is right now. But if he has another one of those sort of seasons, we can look back and say, yeah, peak Jeff Bassa, peak Noah Sewell. I might lean Bassa. I think both are fantastic players, though. Today's the day. Today's the day. If you know what I'm talking about, well, of course you're sticking around. So today, as you are listening to or watching this show, the day that it releases is the day the Generation O uniforms are coming out. To say that I am excited is an understatement, because I've mentioned this on the show several times over the past month or whatnot, like June 25th, June 26th. Those are the days to look forward to. Well, here's June 26th. It is here. It has arrived. And what we have is a lot of anticipation, another reveal. And I think it's really easy to ask yourself the question, like, does this matter? Is this something that we should care about, or is it just fun? I think it's both. And I don't think that that's some huge negative. Oh, Oregon just likes their uniforms. Yeah, well, it's an identifiable brand. It is a marker for the University of Oregon, and is something that people associate with that is an absolute positive. I mean, I got a question on the show a while back, not even that long ago, really, about Oregon's uniforms in the new NCAA video game. You don't think that anybody else in the country, of course there are other people in the country thinking about that, like, oh man, I got to play with Oregon because, well, I got to see what kind of uniform combos they have. Like, this has been such an integral part of Oregon's identity as a program, and now as a program with Dan Lanning at the helm. And on that front, I saw that there was a 25-minute video that got released about the history of Oregon and Nike, and those two things, building off one another, but mostly, Oregon building off Nike, of course. But there is a really, really interesting historical tie. And I read a book a while ago that my grandparents gifted me called The Men of Oregon, about Bill Bowerman and starting Nike and Blue Ribbon Sports, turning it into Nike, Phil Knight getting involved in the whole 9 yards. And if you didn't know that, it's a fascinating read. If not, go watch the video that was put out. I have not watched the 25-minute kind of short film just yet. I'm definitely going to. It is on my my list of things to do, and something I should see as an Oregon fan, as host of this show. But I'm excited to see what they come out with. Generation O. I was talking yesterday on the show that it feels like something that they're going to pay homage to the Joey Harrington era. That's the sense. I don't think that's a wild prediction. I think it could be accurate, but I don't know. And I am very excited to see. And I think as Oregon goes into the Big Ten, you'll have plenty of schools and other fan bases that'll just roll their eyes at this stuff. Oh boy, Oregon's doing it. Oregon's doing all this sort of stuff. You think any recruits out there are keeping their eye on, like, hey, what's Oregon doing? Here, ask yourself this question if you don't think it matters in recruiting. And I'm not saying it's altering the landscape. It's just something that Oregon does that people pay attention to. That's an undeniable fact. And all these things have accumulated over the years to help Oregon be in the Big Ten rather than getting left behind in realignment. So if you think it's a coincidence that Oregon, after a major official visit weekend full of 5 stars and other blue chip guys, with more visits scheduled in the coming days, weeks, months as they build out the 2025 class, you think the fact that they're dropping all of this content in the middle of recruiting season is a coincidence? Do you think it just happened? Oh yeah, we just pick a date, whatever. It's like, oh wow, it happened to line up with recruiting stuff. You think it's an accident? Because I'm going to go with no. No, it's not an accident. Or when they finish the court, these things are planned. I work in an athletic department at Southern Utah. Nothing happens by chance, accident, coincidence. Nothing goes out at a certain time that doesn't get posted or published for a reason. So I think this is all just part of the recruiting pitch, part of the selling point. You're going to come up here and you're going to look awesome in this sort of stuff. And I can't wait to see what it looks like. And send me all the thoughts once you have seen them, and we'll discuss and see what we like and what we don't like. Because, frankly, it's the end of June. I'm here for some uniform talk. I am here for it. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.